Hello, this is Max Drake. I want to talk about this app, which is a Python Streamlit app, which is expense and income app that I've got through here. There's a little bit of story behind this. I initially had a Glide app. So Glide is a no-code app that you can actually make web apps without any coding. And when I first started to use it, I ended up getting very enthusiastic and actually wrote quite a lot of apps for it. One that I actually wrote was a personal finance app, and in that one you could actually just add an amount, say $12, and you could choose who it is for, say Pack and Save. They have a list, and then if you didn't actually have a somebody who you paid before, you could actually just put other and then add somebody else, the other chap, and then you could select which category it went into. Then you could select which account you took the money out of, and you could also say, I've got one here which is it part of a business or is it just a personal expense? And then at the end you can add a comment, buy biscuits and caviar. And then you can add. Now the nice thing with this particular app is that its back end is in fact a Google Sheet. So this is really great. You can actually access this Google Sheet and get the data out quite a lot. Quite quickly, and use it. So if you want to do some analytics, or you want to see how much you spent in the month or whatever, you could quickly use that information. So this was kind of a couple of components in here I just want to talk through because they're kind of quite important from the point of view of an app. One, if you're using an app, typing things in can be quite tedious, so it's better to actually have pull downs with lists and things like that. Also, you want to prioritize things at the top of the list that you use more frequently, so you're only going to ones at the bottom that you use less frequently. So that's one of the aspects that you want to consider as well. So you're doing the minimum number of typing when you're on a mobile app. The other thing that you want to consider is its responsiveness, and this is where, to a certain extent, this app let me down. I found that I used it, but it was a little bit slow. I found the process of how this works is a demonstration on here, but you have it on your mobile app, so it's on my Android, or you can actually have it on an iPhone because it's a web app as such. And unlike a progressive web app, it actually doesn't store that information in your screen or in your phone. It actually writes the stuff to Glide, which is over in the States and I'm over here in New Zealand. Then from the Glide, it goes and puts it into your Google Sheets. And in this one here, it put it into the sheet through there. Then it's got to send that information back so that it's displayed in the app, such that that information is there as well. So it's doing a thing from your phone across to Glide, from Glide to Google Sheets, your Google Sheets in your Google Mail account, and then back to Glide and then back to you. So I just found it sluggish, but I still use the setup for it. I think was quite brilliant. And I had a dashboard in this one here which actually has images, and it's got graphs through here, and it's also, you can filter out by what category you'd actually been spending stuff, with some KPIs at the front with just saying what your total bills and what you were expected to spend. So I found it useful, but I mainly used the thing, and I got to the point where I actually just used a spreadsheet. I didn't actually bother using the actual app itself because it was sluggish. So I suddenly thought, I've always wanted to rebuild this app in a way, and I decided that I was going to do it in Python with and do it. So I looked on the website and on YouTube and a couple of other places to look at doing an expense app. And there was a few there. There was a couple by Flask, using Flask, and then there was a few with Streamlit and stuff like this. And this one by Sven, who's coding is fun, is the one that was nearest to what I actually wanted to do. And so I used Streamlit. I'd used Streamlit before on an electricity app that I was doing. That one there displayed the power usage and the on my substation what the price was for the power at a specific point in time. So I was comfortable with Streamlit, but in this particular video, what he uses is this backend called Deta, where he sets up a noSQL database, and he links to that. So when I actually followed along on his video and tried to set up, the Deta interface had changed from what he actually shows on the video. And when I thought about using a noSQL, I suddenly thought, no, I'm quite happy with SQL. One of the desires that I'd actually had was to actually experiment with Python with SQLite. I quite like the idea of SQLite, which is a database in a single file. So this file here is in fact the database for this. So you can actually have a local file, which is your database. So I suddenly thought, I want to experiment with that. So I kind of took a lot of the ideas that he had on here and took his code initially and tried it out, and then I thought, okay, then I'll start writing it myself. So I reached that point in time where I was going to do something, and there was a few issues about deployment. Now, one of the reasons I actually decided to use Streamlit is that the Streamlit has a cloud where you can actually deploy your app for free. I think it's public, but you can actually deploy your app on Streamlit cloud so that you can actually use it straight away. So I thought, well, this is actually a good exercise, and it's a nice idea to use the SQLite database. Now, here's one here, and a couple of the other ones that I saw. This is one of the issues which I have with Python, is deploying the app and how you actually deploy it. So from going back to the Glide app, this one here links back so that you can access your data inside the spreadsheet. So that's quite good. It's accessible. You can get that information. And because of the slowness, now I used Glide at the very beginning and built all these apps and went mad with it. I sort of got all of those out of there, and I found it was fantastic for prototyping stuff. It's no code, so it's kind of just drag and drop type thing to get the elements that you want to do it. It still takes a bit of time. But I think what they've tried to do to speed up the fact that it's going to Glide and then it's going on to things is that you'll find that now they've got a data area here where they've got a database inside their inside Glide itself. So you'd be using Glide. So instead of actually going from the app across to Glide, then to Google Sheets, you actually just go to Glide and then back again. Now, since they've actually used that thing, I haven't built many apps since then. I've sort of moved on to other things. And so I might actually have to revisit that at some point in time and just look at the responsiveness of that. But to a certain extent, in my interest in learning and trying to do things is that I wanted to do this finance app. Now, I sort of looked on and I found a whole lot of things with the Streamlit stuff like that. With Python and doing ones, but none of that. And I sort of fiddled around with, but I just couldn't get into doing it. I sort of lose a bit of motivation with the fact that I've already built the app before, so I don't feel that challenged by it. I'm kind of learning a couple of other things along the way. So my preferential tool in a way is the AI one, is to actually use Bing Chat and Bing Crosby because of the fact it's free. And and ChatGPT, you have to keep on logging in, whereas I've actually just got a hotkey, out fee, and it opens another tab straight away. So it's dead easy to just get in and start chucking some stuff in there. So what I decided to do was I decided to write the prompt. Can you write a Python Streamlit app that you can select from a list of category? And then I've just given a list, an idea of what the categories that I'd have an input field for sum in dollars and amount in date selectors, default today with a note field, say 150 characters, and a submit button that will then put it into an SQLite table. So I took this and then I said, well, I can then add another field called payee, and then I've given a list of certain payees, and you can add extra values to this list and make the list another table inside the SQL database so you can read the table, but if a new value is added to a specific transaction, it will also be added to the table. So I can take all of that and I put that in as a prompt inside Google Bing, Bing Crosby. So it starts trotting off. Now, at the same time as this happened, I also came across Bard. Now, Bard had been looked into its experimental stage by Google in the States, but I suddenly saw this little RSS feed somewhere that suddenly said, well, actually you can access Guard Experimental from outside the US. So I suddenly thought, yes, please, and I gave it across. So I gave it the same prompt in there as well, and off it goes and starts writing. So when I come back to Bing, you see it's actually writing quite a lot of code through there, and it's actually writing the core of the applet, like it's importing Streamlit and it's importing SQL3, it's importing date time, and it's creating a table. It's got a few little functions along the way here, and then you do it. So I could actually just take this straight away, plug it into VS Code, paste it in, and run it. And I suddenly thought, well, I've got a little Streamlit app, and I've got something to begin with. And I thought, wow. Then I did the same thing, and I used the same prompt inside Bard, and it wrote it in a slightly different way. But overall, it did exactly the same thing. You know, it calls the DB something different. It structures its text this sort of way, or the execute things instead of a single line. It actually puts it into a thing. But overall, it goes through and does the things that you want. So I'm quite wowed by this. And both of these, a lot of the times, they actually put the categories as a list and the pays as a list rather than as separate tables. But it's just shaped the stuff. So suddenly that got me really enthusiastic. So I suddenly thought, I've got some code straight away that I can run. And then I can suddenly say, well, instead of the payees being a list, can I make them another table? For the categories, can we do this? Can I do that? So I could add little snippets and get them and add them to other bits of code so that I could get the thing to run. So I was quite excited how from quite a small little description I could get things to run. So then I could actually keep the original core, write this expense to a SQL table, and then say, well, I want to view the information from a dev, so I want another button for that, then I want this and I want that. And it started to actually shape, and I kind of just kept on cutting and pasting into new apps.py script files, and just kept on testing and then tweaking it and doing some adjustments as I went along. And I found I was more used to Bing, and so I actually sort of used Bing as the main criteria through there. But both of them did quite good. Now, I was quite impressed with Bard, is that inside Bard at the very bottom, it's got this thing which is somewhere along the bottom, Python transaction py or whatever it's called it. You can actually run it. And one of the things you can do inside Bard is that you can get a collab, which is a sort of like a Jupyter environment for Python, where you can run it inside a collab inside your Google account. And so you can actually just run this in iterations and through there. So I was quite excited about that. But I don't tend to do that. I tend to just like using VS Code. But I like the idea that you can actually just run this directly inside of a collab, because it's a good way to share it with somebody else if you were actually collaborating on something. So because both of these two, with a very simple prompt as such, and it wasn't that the initial prompt wasn't that great. I suddenly thought, well, I'm not actually putting too much information in there, and I sort of refined it as I went through. And then I suddenly thought, well, okay, then I had some issues with the way that the database was working, so I then wanted an integer primary key to start dealing with things and stuff like that. And it slowly developed that it made quite a nice little app that I got. So I started to develop. So from this one here with the Streamlit with the database, you know, he had a different database, but I ended up with the SQLite database. It worked very nicely. Now I've just got to go through and just quickly stop this app at this point in time, control cancel, and then I've just got to delete that database. And why is that? Retry. What's happening there? Cancel. What's there? I want to database, remove the database. Yep. So it's connected there. So I'm just going to rename this other one. I sort of plan creating a new one from scratch. And so there. So we have the original. Oh no, sorry, I didn't delete the other one. Delete permanently. So we've deleted that one now. I renamed the other one there. So rename. So I'd already filled some data into this particular database through here. So you can't view the database file inside of VS Code as it's standard at the moment. I haven't really explored it too much. So I've just got one script through here, which is that particular app. It goes on for about 550 lines, but the first 300 lines are basically just small little functions. And I've just written them, and I've sort of overwritten them. I could most probably refine all of these, but I've just written them as individual standalone ones that I can do. So the first 300 is just an awful lot of repetition in what they're actually doing. And then the second one from 300 to 500 is actually the Streamlit app as the way that it's presenting itself and all the graphics that go with it. So, and that was mainly through the app itself, from the code, and I just kind of repeated the code, because in the app itself, and which one am I? I'm on the localhost one here. Inside the localhost one here, I've got a tab for expenses, I've got a tab for income, and they're basically exactly the same. And then I've got one called summary, where I can actually display summary, whether it's charts or whether it's pull down tables or whatever. And at this point in time, I haven't quite decided how I want to present that data to myself, because what I found when I was doing my personal app, although I actually had a summary page, I never used it. I basically just use the main one, but if I find that, and because I actually use it at home, I'd actually use the spreadsheet itself to actually look at those things. But generally, I only looked at the pages, the expenses page. So I've got the app, and I've split it up so that I can, I'm just going to Control-Shift-C and just show this in the mobile app way. Through here, and let's get out of there, or we just close that down and have that. So here's the app through here. So I can add a date, I can add an amount. So here's an amount, we just put $12, and we're going to give it to the warehouse here. I haven't spelled that wrong. And then I'm going to say petrol, let's say, who cares? And then it's from this particular account that I've got through there, and we're going to choose that one there, and we're going to put a note, blah. I can't even spell that. And then I can submit that expense. So that's what I've got on that page. The next thing that I've got on that page is view expenses. So if I choose the month that I want, which is the 7th here, and I just do view expenses, here you'll see, oh, how come I've only got one? You can see I've got a list of one through there. So if we just go back through there and go and look at the 6th, view expenses, I've got a couple of items through there, and I don't think I'd actually got pays and things through there at that particular point in time. So that's all that one shows. Now, if I go into here and I think actually it was $14 rather than the $12 or something, and it was, let's just say it wasn't the warehouse, it was Pack and Save or something, and then we go submit that again, we're suddenly thinking, well, we've got a dud line in the database, so what do we do about that? Well, one thing that we can do is we can view expenses by month, and if we view them, we can see we've got the same one, but it's repeated, and one's correct and one's wrong. So I've hidden a whole lot of other functions under this thing called expense functions. And the first one is delete. Now I've hidden the delete button here because I didn't want the delete button at the top, just in case I accidentally put a number in and deleted a line that I didn't want to. So I suddenly thought I just want to make it a little bit difficult. So in this one here, I've got an ID called 3. So if I just put in 3 there and go delete expense, and now I just view expenses again for the month of July, you'll see it only comes back to there. And it also gives me the total. I didn't actually draw your attention to that before. Now also in the expenses ones, we can add another payee. We can list the ID of the payees. This does something, it jumps back out into here again, but if we go back again, you'll see it's got a list of all of the payees that we've got in there. So I've got a separate table that has payees. I've got a separate table that has categories. So if we just go and list the categories, it'll go through and show you all the categories that we've got. And we can delete one of those categories. So we can suddenly saying, oh, well, we don't want category 4. We can come into here, go 4 and don't delete. And we can also have a list of accounts that I've got. So whether it's a Visa account or Orbit or Cash or however I pay for that. So I can do all of those parts of the processes through there. I can do exactly the same in the income, and I can view my income for the month, and in this one I've actually got it through as empty. So if we add one in here, and we'll actually just say 234, and we'll just say rental or something like that. We'll say Kindle book sales, that would be nice, and we'll say that went into my Orbit account, and we'll say book sales for June. Actually, no, it's their website. It most probably be April, because they're. And then when I submit that one, now if I just come into here and view income, we've got that one through there. Now it's only got that one there. So if I actually went through and did 23 and just said La & Co or something, and just say Kindle book sales, and we'll actually say Orbit again through there. Oh no, we'll go. The pay will be Stripe, and that'll be the D2D ones, and so we're putting it into that particular account, and I submit that one through there. If we look at our expenses, we've now got both of them through there, and you'll see that the sum has totaled the sums through here, so it's doing a sum. Now all this is just a data frame that it's actually just displaying through there. So inside of here, I've got all of these other functions that I can actually do. But really on a day-to-day basis, you're not actually adding a lot of payees or payers or any of these sorts of things. They sort of only occur once in a while. So that's managed in that particular way. So at this point in time, I've got all of my expenses and I've got all of my income. But, you know, this is one of the things that I want to talk about with this app. With this app here, it's got the back end, which is my spreadsheet, so I can quickly access the data that I want. I can take this information here and I can copy and paste it into another spreadsheet, or I can use it in another tab and actually do manipulation and calculations and things like that on that information. But if you've got an app, how do you do that? So one of the functions that I got, and this was the one that sort of had me bothered for a while, was exporting to a CSV file. So this now comes down to the fact of where do you deploy your app to. Now if I'm running this app here, oops, sorry, now I want to go back to, I've got two localhost ones. Go away. If I'm deploying it to the local host, that's why it was all funny there, because if I actually just view my expenses on this one, you'll see I've got lots on this particular one, so this database has got more in it. So this is the thing. This is running on my local host, so this is running this script on my PC here, and it's writing to a local file. So if I open this up here, here's the script I'm running, and here is the database that I'm using. This one here, I'm running on my server. So this server is located in Germany, and it's writing to a database file that's on the server in Germany. So how do I access this information? So I'm going to do this here. It's going to be a little bit weird, but inside of here, I'm going to say export, because you may want to do some further analytics on your data. I'm going to export the expenses to a CSV. Now it's going to come up with a little button through here afterwards, hopefully. Running, and it should say, oh, it's not even going to do that, but it's actually written it to a CSV. Oh, I wonder if it's down there. Yeah, there we are. Expenses data exported to CSV file, and it's even emailed me that one through there, and I'll talk about that separately. But to a certain extent, if I just come back into my file through here, I'll just delete these ones actually. Delete, and I'll delete that one so that I can demonstrate through that one. So we haven't done the income one through here. So if I just come back to that app and I go into the income tab, go down into the income functions and go to the bottom and export to CSV, you'll see it should come through with a notification saying that it's been exported through to that. So when we come into the file and look at that, at the income, there's the data that I've got. So it's just downloaded all of the data from that table called income. So that's handed through there. So I can access that on the local one. But what happens when I'm on the server? if I'm on the server and I do that one, it downloads a file to a local directory on my server computer, which is over in Germany. So that's no good to me. So after I do that, I've got to run a separate script. Well, there's two ways that I could do this, and I've decided to sort of do a simple way. So what happens is that we just go through, and I think I'll look at, I've got one here called export income to CSV. So what it actually does is it reads from the database everything in that table called income. It puts it into a data frame. It then gets the data frame to CSV and writes it to a file. So it's written it to a file called income, which we've seen already. Now what happens when it comes through into the Streamlit at the end is it comes through, we hit the button export to income, I want on the button, to CSV, is it goes through and it runs that function through there, and so it writes the file to the local directory, and then we run a sub-process which runs this extra file. Now the extra file, this is the one for the one, so this one's using a .environ file where I'm hiding my from account, my to account, and my password for my Gmail. So I don't need to hide my to one really, but my from account is which account I'm doing to and what's the password. Now the password there is the app password, so it's not your normal password for your Gmail account. There's a couple of videos, and if you see early videos that I've done on emails automation, you'll see how that one's managed. Is that you need to create an app password so that it doesn't hit the two-factor authentication. So it's taken that data which I've just concealed inside there, and it just sends me an email and just gets the attachment, and the attachment is either the expenses file or the expenses.csv or the income.csv. So if I run this same exercise, not on the one which is on my local server, but on the one which is on my which is not this one here, which I'm just running on my local host on my PC, but on the one which I'm actually running from my server. If I actually come into the expenses on here, so we do the expenses one because we've already had the other one, and it's hidden away, I can export expenses to the CSV. So if I hit that button there, it will then send that to me by email. Unfortunately, you've got the wrong wording on the bottom of that. So if I just come into my app, so there it is, expenses CSV email. So if I just go into my emails and into there, I think it is, you can see that that last one has sent it through. So that was the one which is the expensive. So now if I save that one there and just save it to expenses, it's just going to overwrite one that was already there. And then if I go into that folder, and I think that was the expenses one, you'll see that there's only a few items in it because of the fact of most of my talk, or if I've been inputting stuff in, I've been putting the inputting information on my local server on my local host one blast rather than on my other one. Now, one of the things which I actually had a problem with when I was using this to begin with was when I was using the SQLite. I played with it before, and when I looked at the SQLite and you look at the code of what they've got here, this creates the tables and something. So if I just quit this app, because I want to demonstrate a couple of things through here. How do I do that? I need to come into here, now I need to go into there, and I need to Control C, cancel. So I'm now stopping that one through there, and if I come up to here, I can now close that one down. So if I just look, and if we just go back in again, I'm going to take that one there, and I'm just going to move it up to here. So it's not in the same folder. So it's not in my folder, it's kept it out of the folder here. Now, if I run this script again, the first thing it'll do, so if I just go into here and just type Streamlit run that particular file, it's going to go and run it. It's going to start the server up again. There's a server started, and we've got the local host one coming through here. Now, when we look on our new database, it's got no payees, no categories, no accounts, no nothing. And if I view expenses, there's nothing there. So I've got a completely clean database to start off with again. So this means you can add this script to somebody else. They can just take that script and it will create a perfectly clean database of which they can actually start adding their own expense functions. Like we can add a new payee, and the PA is going to call one, add payee, and let's just go back into there again. It does that at the beginning, and we're going to add a new pay 2, add payee, we're going to add new pay equal 3, and add category A, add category B, add category C, and add C, and then we're going to add account 1, 2, 3, and we're going to add account 3, 4, 5, or who cares, add account. Now, if I list my accounts, there's my accounts, 1, 2, 3, whatever. If I list my categories, I've got A, B, C. Oh, I've got a blank one there. So I don't want that one, but I can, because I'm deleting by the ID, I can actually just say delete category 1, delete. Now if I just say list the categories, I've just got 2 and 3. Now if I go and look at my payees, I've got some new payees through here. So when I come into here, I've now got those new payees that I can actually choose to do. So I'm going to go and use payee 2, and I'm going to have category 3, and I'm going to have that one there, and I'm going to put an amount in of 23.42, and then I'm going to go blah, because blah is very important, and go submit expenses. Now when I view expenses, I've got that new one through there. When I add another one, so let's just go 32, and then I'm going to do it to pay number 1, and then I go submit expenses. When I view expenses, I've got 2 expenses, and it's summed them up. So I've now got the sum of both of those two together. So I've got a rolling sum of where my expenses are at that point in time, and I can do the same for the income. So one of the issues, as I was saying when I was dealing with this before, is that I'm used to, when I'm doing SQL, like in here, inside the script itself, it's writing all this SQL, insert into expenses, da 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 da, and that's the phrasing that you do through here. When I was doing this, and this is what Bing and Bard were both doing for me, I was having problems visualizing. So how do I visualize the tables? So one of the things I was watching, the thing I follow along a little bit, was the automator. So there's a chap called Joe who sort of overall looks at the thing, but the programmer there is called Isaiah, and he's really, really smart. But he was demonstrating some SQLite, and he came up and showed me this, or displayed this SQLite Studio. And I thought, oh, that's really cool, because now I can actually visualize the tables. So inside this wee tiny file here, expense tracker through that, I can now view the file. So if I just come into this app, which is just load up, and I go into the database, add a database, go and find your database, your SQLite database. So we'll open up the first one first, because it doesn't have much in it, and we'll go, okay. And there is the thing. So we can now look at the table. So let's just go and look at payee. And here's the structure of the payee. It's got an integer and it's got a name. Now it's got to have the name not null, or it won't put anything in there. So if I go and look at the data in there, I've got, in the first place, I've got one called 1 and I've got one called 2. Now I can actually change that, and I can call that Fred, just for the sheer hell of it. And then if I click back out of there, I can update that. So I've got in my app, if we just go back to, let's switch those over, because I'm using this one here. Now, if I just refresh this, I'm going to go and read the database, and then the first payee is called Fred now. So I can actually just update. But the nice thing that I find on this is that I can visualize the database and the tables themselves, so I can prioritize things. Now, one of the things that sort of surprised me when I was doing this, and we're going to something like category because we've got date. No, sorry, I want expenses. So when we come into expenses, we've got all of these. We've got a date, an ID, a date, an amount payee, and stuff like that. But when I come into date and we look at the data type, in a normal SQL database, you've usually got quite a few data types and things like that. And one of the data types that you've got is a date, and you've also got one called a date time as well. But this doesn't. It has a blob, it has an integer, it has a numeric and a real. The difference between the numeric and the real can go to any number of decimal places. With the numeric, you can constrict it. So you can say numeric is size 5 left of the decimal point and 2 to the right. So it only has 2 digits after decimal point. So you can do that sort of thing. Whereas if you actually just have text, you can't do that. So we just take those out. So date, because date has usually got a number and then a dash or a stroke or something like that, it's got a mix, so you've got to actually make it a string or a text type information. So you can make things not null and things to protect your data type stuff. So inside here, if I was to come into expense functions through here, and I've got a new payee, now I haven't put anything in there at all, and I'm going to go add payee. When I go through and look at my list of payees, you see nothing's happened. That's got to be non-null. That means you can't leave it empty and add another row. It's got to have something in there. So 1, 2, 3, add payee, and now if I look at payees, you'll find that if I've got a new 1, 1, 2, 3. So you can start allowing for things like non-nulls in there to make sure that you actually have information coming in there at the very beginning. So overall, this app is ready to go. It doesn't require anything else to run apart from making sure that you actually have inside the code, if we come back into here, that you actually have the correct libraries in there. So if you've got all of these libraries all the way through here, you're doing fine. Now, again, one of the ways that this one, I'm using a separate script, so it's calling a separate script to actually run the email. Now I could have added at the bottom into here, instead of that, I could have actually added this script in here for the email itself to actually run that through there if I wanted to. But I decided to have it as a separate app. Sometimes I don't want the main file to be too cluttered. I want it quite simple. So one of the things that I was thinking about was after it actually emailed me the income.cv or the expenses.cv, I'll get it to delete those files. So this is something that I was thinking about doing through here, and in the end I concluded it doesn't need to. It'll just, next time you actually export an expenses CSV or an income CSV, it's just going to overwrite what's there before. So it's always going to give you the up-to-date one, because in here it creates it and then you run this second file over it. So then you run the script, which then takes that file and sends it off. So I can appreciate why Sven used the Deta data for the back end, or the Deta structure from the back end, but I actually wanted to learn SQLite. I then found out about this really cool tool, SQLite Studio, that allows you to go in and do some editing. Now where you do the editing in your SQLite table is the fact is when you're doing a pull down through here and you're doing this information, it's rather, I'll come back to this one here. I've mentioned this before, but you want the ones that you use most frequently at the top and the ones that you use less frequently at the bottom, because you don't want to constantly be scrolling down, especially if your list gets a lot longer and you've got a lot of suppliers. Although I think I'd most probably end up with about 10 or 12, or maybe 10 to 15, and then I'd have one called Other, similar to what I did in this app here, whereas if it wasn't part of a list, I would actually just put Other, and then I'd actually, instead of putting a note there, I'd actually just put it in my note thing, and the other one was Freddie is who I paid, and add, and then it would do that. I haven't quite done that. So now I've only just written this. I've sort of been playing it with about the last week and just trying to refine it. And I've got it where it's working. So now I actually want to go out and test drive it. So this month is my plan to actually use this as for doing the processing and just testing it out. So I've got it up and running. I've got it on my server. It's ready to go. So now I can do my tests, and I've got my main payees and things like that. Oh, sorry. So the whole idea with the payee, if you want to change your payee, so on this one I don't think I've got many in here. No, let's see, what else did I have? Category. Let's look at my data into there. I've only got 2 of that. Account and data. I've only got 2 for that. So let's just say I wanted it in another order, or let's just jump into, where are we? We're on. I keep on getting confused with this. This is the local host one. So let's just go into here, and we're going to add. Oh, that one's got 3 in there. Okay then, so we're going to add another payee, which is 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to add a payee through there. So when I list my payees, I've now got 4 of them. So if I come into my database again, and if I just do a refresh, oh sorry, no, I want payees, and am I in payee? I'll double click on it, data, structure, I'm on the payee one. And if I refresh that, I should have the 4. Now suddenly thinking, I actually want 1, 2, I want 1, 2, 3, then I want 2, then I want 3, 4, 5. Well, what I can actually do in here is I can make this number 5 and just click out of there and go yes. And when I refresh it, now it's at number 5. Then I suddenly say, well, actually I want this one. No, I want 1, 2, 3 as number 1. So I can come back to there and refresh that. And if I just refresh now, that's in the way. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I've got 5 for it. So I can reorganize my lists if I want to. Instead of actually, the other way that you do it is just delete it all and then rewrite it all in manually so that you got it in the order you want. But in fact, using the SQLite Studio, you could do that. So I'm finding this a handy tool to use. So I'll give you a link just to this page here, because there's a few other ones that you may want to go and glance at. I'll give you a link to Glide, and I must admit, just a little bit of a personal thing on that. I find Glide really good for doing prototyping, because you know code, you can actually just get a whole load of elements and put them together and see how you work. So that was one of the ones, the whole thinking behind you know, trying to use lists rather than typing speeds things along from a mobile apps point of view. So I found that quite it's a great tool to use. So that's a good tool to use. So I'll give you a link to Glide, and you can get a free account and explore some of those things. I'll give a link to this. I'll give a link to SQL Studio Lite, and and I'll also post the code as I've got it so far. And there won't be a database because you'll create your own. The only issue that you'll actually have is that you'll actually have to make your own Gmail app password so that you can utilize it inside of the app. And if you want to use your own environment, or else actually just add it into the main script is what you want. So in the script that I've got on here, where I'm using the email code and things like that, you can just put your the from to and the password. You can actually just put your information in here and it will work fine. Overall, I'm really pleased with how it's done. Now I've got to test drive it to see how responsive it is. Is it responsive enough such that it's not as slowish and sluggish as this? And in some ways, after doing this, and if it is reasonably responsive, I'll just be using it from the future and then start tweaking it and enhancing things like that. For the ones that I've got in my personal finance one, I've got this other ones, whether it's going to actually be billable as file things, or whether it's just personal, or whether it's a mix of things. So identifying which classification I put things. And I may or may not add that. It may be useful. And then what I decide to do on the on the summary page, because I kept that because I do have an intention of just having something, and it is good to actually have the oversight through there. And maybe I actually take things like send to CSV into the summary page, and I take them out of the other one through there. One other thing that I actually found, and this is a good demonstration on the localhost one through here, is that I'm getting sort of used to Streamlit now. Now, one of the things with Streamlit I do find a little bit, weird is the way that they do it. Is I just ran this out through here. Is the using the CSS out too. If I just rerun this app through here now, that's the localhost one there. That's what I want. And we come into the expense one, so it comes on. So I want it on expense because that's the main one that I've done. Now all of this one has the color through there that I want, and I wanted to use that color, so I went up into here and I went into more tools, and I found the eyedropper, and I found out what code it was. So that's where I found where the code was for that, and I suddenly said, well, if you notice, the buttons and these things here don't stand out very much at all, and on an app, on a mobile, they're not very clear. So one of the things that I wanted to do was put a background color in there, and I thought, well, let's kind of keep the consistency of what these ones through here are. And then the other one is when I was doing this expander, whereas I can put a fill color inside of the buttons, I can't put a fill color. I couldn't find a way of doing a fill, and Bard and Bing couldn't help me. So I had to use a different method. So I just want to walk through those because it was a sort of bit quirky. The rest of the Streamlit app, you just kind of use their bits through there, and I thought it was quite marvelous. But the two things that I just want to demonstrate through here. So the first one here, it's got this. Oops, blast. Out two. There we go. It's got this HTML code that you put in here, so it's styled. So basically, you're using a bit of CSS, and it's got the button. And I found it, and it did this one where I could actually put that color in there, and the text color was white. And I thought, well, that's fine, not a problem. Then you've got to put this markdown, and then unsafe allow HTML true. So it's part of the thing through there. When I got to the second part, now I'm just going to refresh, save that. Oh, blast! I didn't need to run it. Close that out. So we'll refresh that. Now you see that the buttons stand out. So the buttons are quite clear. You know exactly what you got to hit. The second one is this. It's not very clear that there's anything happening here. So what it suggested, I can't remember where I found this one from, is you go into here and you go and inspect that element, and I just flick that over to the right, and when we get that element through there, what you're able to do inside here is suddenly saying, well, okay, then let's make the pixel size I don't know if I can go back and make it something like 24. Now, if you see here, that pixel size suddenly 30. So I thought that's good. It's making it stand out a little bit more because I couldn't put fill in there. I couldn't increase the color, the boundary line to be any more. The only thing that I was able to do, which I'll jump into in a second, was this. So what I ended up doing was when I got that, when I do the 24th, I could actually copy that across the rules wherever that is, the style editor. I can't remember where it is, but anyway, I found I could grab that through. I'm not that familiar with this because I don't get too enthusiastic about it. It ended up coming through with the Streamlit expander header, div whatever child it was, but the nth child of this, that and the other, it was strong, so they've got the strong quotes on them, and then I was able to increase the font size to whatever it was. So on this one I might make it 24. The other thing that I could actually do on here that I decided to do was make that text red as well. So I did that, and so when we look at the app now, when I do a refresh on there, it's sort of telling you that there's something hidden, that there's something more down here, so you can come and click on this and then you can see what it is. So you know there's another element that you've got can do something with. So what I could actually do at the beginning when I was first initially trying to do something with that is when I found that I was actually using Markdown, where I was using the double asterisks either side of the bit of text that I want. That turns it into bold, and then the other bit along the side is that I was doing the single asterisk, which actually makes it italic. But I couldn't find a way of actually just increasing the text size within the Markdown when I just tried to do, I think for when I'm using Obsidian, which is using Markdown, I just use the hash signs. But of course, because you're using Python, the hash signs don't really work. It just sort of comments everything out for it. So that didn't work out very well. So that's when I ended up having to use the CSS thing from actually looking at the viewer to find the element. So it was just a little bit fiddly from my point of view. But overall, I'm very pleased with the app as to where it is. It does all the function things that I need. It also takes care of the fact that if I've deployed it to a remote server, that I can still access the data inside there. And at the moment, it's just taking everything out of that table. So if I wanted to, I could. I could suddenly saying, well, I could then only show me the expenses for a certain month, so I could modify that script if I wanted to. But at this point in time, you know, once you've got it as a CSV, you can just rip off the data that you don't particularly want. So I have no issues with that at all. So I hope you found that of interest. It's been a kind of a nice one of these things of it's a tool I've already had. I was a bit disappointed with it. I really wanted to kind of try Python and doing it, so it was a coding thing. I struggled. First of all, I was just trying to find ideas from other people and what they had actually done. Decided to use Streamlit. I decided to use an SQLite database, and I suddenly thought, well, what's the issues with that when you start deploying it? And if you deploy it somewhere, how do you? If you're deploying it somewhere else, how do you get the information out of that database that you can do? Now, I've tried a couple of expenses app that I've got a little Android app or something like that and got it, and a lot of them you can kind of put the data into them, but you can't get the data out, and that's what I find frustrating. So the whole thing of being able to actually do everything up front inside the app, so you can add extra, you can add an extra expense, you can delete an expense, you can say if you've written it wrong, you can actually just go through and modify, do all of those things. So there's a few things of it's now in the testing stage where I just go out and use it, and then I'm suddenly thinking, well, I would like to know so and so at a quick glance. So maybe on my summary page, I need to have a little bit more information on this. So a quick graph or maybe a bar chart or something like that would be the best way of doing that sort of thing. In the app that I did on the other one, it had just cancel out of that. It had a spend, so it actually had an expense app, but it didn't actually have an income app because I used to manually put that into the spreadsheet. So that was something that this app didn't require because I had immediate access to the back end of the data. But in the one that I'm doing, I've got to do it all via the app. But if the app's a lot faster, I have no problem with that, and I have no problem with the database setting up where it is. The one little issue that you do sometimes have with the database is that you can't modify things inside of SQLite Studio for things like if you wanted to make the structure of the data, you wanted to make this non-null. In fact, since it's an auto increment, I don't think you can. But if I came into here and try to make that non-null and go OK and then save, and then it tries to write that to the table, it's actually done it, and it's done it correctly. So let's just do a refresh, and it says fine. Although it does it automatically, so it don't really. It's a bit superfluous in a way. Sometimes it won't let you do these sorts of things because the app is running the database, so the app is connected to the database at the same time. So it lets you modify the data in there, but inside the tables. But sometimes it doesn't let you do some of the other things that you may need to want to tweak and stuff. So sometimes you just got to make sure you stop your app and close it down. So come back into here and quit out, control, cancel, and then you can maybe do more manipulation of your database through here as it is. So the nice thing with this is that you can locally write a lot of information to your database and then just copy that database across to your server. So if you've set up all of your payees and all of that sort of thing in a local setting, you can just move it across and migrate it across to the other one. Now again, I haven't played with this where I can see whether I can actually migrate things that have two databases open and then copy expenses from one database across and add it to the other one. But that's most probably a little SQL thing that you'll be able to do, although I haven't tried it yet. So there must be an SQL editor that suddenly says take from track 1 and put it into track 1 expenses and things like that. So that's another little thing that actually speeds up. So you can do setups on your local and then just have them all set instead of trying to set them up on the server or in your mobile phone, which would be quicker to do. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found that of interest. If you do find it handy, please give a thumbs up. Thank you very much indeed.